Poker Clinic. Again, thanks for joining us. So, this is the very first one. This is going to be a little different than what you guys are probably used to here on Twitch TV. This isn't a replay of a tournament. This isn't, a play-by-play of, going deep and crushing, a tournament as it's going. There's no delay here. This is going to sitting down, in kind of a classroom setting, if you will. I'm going to give little 20-30 minute lectures on some ideas that I have. Now today what this session is going to be about are two topics that kind of came up in our first Twitch streams, which was chip inflation and changing gears. So let's start talking about what that means. First off, what is chip inflation? So chip inflation is a term that I borrow from economics, right? So in economics, inflation is the idea that the dollars that you have in your pocket right now are actually going down in value over time. Your purchasing power is going down by the minute. But, over a long period of time, you're looking at pretty drastic results. You got, there was probably a time in history where you could buy an acre of land for, $5? And now that $5 will, buy you a 12-pack of soda, This idea that the value of money goes down over time, kind of applies to poker tournaments. And here's how. Here's how inflation applies in poker tournaments. Now, I think when you're starting in a tournament, right? Everybody starts with the same stack. Let's take the $1,500 no limit event at the World Series of Poker, where everybody starts with $4,500 in chips, and let's say that there's 1,000 people in the tournament, right? So there's say 1.5 million in the prize pool, and your little, if you take your 4,500 in chips, your equity, if someone were to walk up to you and say, sir, how much do you think that you're worth in this tournament? And let's say that just all things being equal, everyone plays exactly the same. There's no juice. You're playing with basically 1,000 different clones of yourself, right? You'd say, well, this 1,500, these 4,500 chips in front of me, my equity in this tournament is, $1,500. So each one of these chips is worth, 33 cents each, basically. Now, the very first hand goes by, and you double up. You are able to get your aces in against the kings, and now instead of 4,500 chips, you have 9,000 chips. And the same guy comes up to you and he's like, so how much do you think your tournament is worth now? Well, the answer is not that your equity is doubled. Your tournament now is not worth 3,000. It's worth a little bit less. That is what we talk about when we think about chip inflation. Chip inflation in poker tournaments basically means this. The more chips you have, the less each individual chip is worth in terms of real money equity. Do we understand so far, guys? I'm going to look here in chat. Just think about this for a second. The more chips you have, the less each individual chip is worth. That begs the question, why? Why would this be the case? Well, let's think about it. The answer is actually pretty simple. The answer is because of the payout schedule. This is the payouts for the No Limit Hold'em main event, the $10,000 buy-in this last year that Martin Jacobson took down. And you'll notice, so first place is $10 million, nice score, right? The prize pool, though, is $62 million. So there was $62 million in this prize pool, and at the end of the tournament, when Martin Jacobson had 100% of the chips in play, he didn't get 100% of the prize pool. He got 10 million, 1/6, still a good score. But that basically means that at the start of the tournament, his chips had the same value as everybody else, but at the end of the tournament, his chips were only worth 18% of what they were at the start of the tournament. This is chip inflation. The fact that they don't award 100% of the prize pool to the winner of the tournament means that when you have 100% of the chips, you get a much smaller percentage of the prize pool than you would if it was just a winner take all. Um, everyone starts with the same chances and the same equity, and as people drop off, everyone's equity rises. So you could go through a whole tournament with the same starting stack, and now if you're on the bubble with that same starting stack, which is a horribly small stack, your equity is pretty huge. The amount of equity per chip is huge compared to what it was at the very beginning of the tournament. You're right about to cash. You're right about to go for that min cash, which is often double your buy-in. Your chances of actually winning haven't really increased much from the beginning of the tournament, but your idea of actually turning that that chip position into real money dollars, into real money equity, has soars every single time we get an elimination. And so that's what generally happens is the tournament kind of goes on. People get bigger and bigger stacks, and then eventually one person ends up with all the chips, gets the pile of money, and gets a small sliver of what the prize pool was. So at the very last hand, you finally take it down. You're sitting here with 18% value.
I'm just gonna put that there for you so you can see the chat too.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Michelle. So I've got the chat going over here. If you guys have any questions about what we're talking about, go ahead and just.
So they're asking questions on the side. I don't think you can answer them. They're asking as they go. So it's good that you can interact with them, but I think you should interact with them as well.
I'm gonna try
about that with you.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to make it interactive, but this is also kind of a presentation. So we are gonna have like a Q&A after this, and if you do have like questions about what we're talking about, like chip inflation and why this matters, go ahead and pop it in. As far as just the normal questions and answers you guys might have, I'll get to it after the little slideshow here. So at the end of a tournament, when you have 100% of the chips, you generally do not get 100% of the prize pool, and that means that we encounter this idea of chip inflation. The more chips you have, the less they're all worth individually. What does this mean? What can we take away from this, and how does it change our strategy when it comes to these poker tournaments? Well, there's 3 takeaways basically when it comes to chip inflation. And the first is that you need to be more conservative with your stack. When you get involved in a hand, you always need to keep this in mind, that the chips that you're about to win are worth less than the chips that you are risking. So you should be avoiding coin flips. If you're sitting here, on the button, and someone comes around and shoves all in with ace queen offsuit, and as he's shoving in, he accidentally turns over his cards. He's like, "Oh shoot, I've got ace queen offsuit. Everyone can see it." And you look down, you have pocket 3s, and as you're thinking about whether you fold or not, both the blinds fold, right? The antes haven't kicked in, and you're ahead, slightly ahead, 51, 52%. Should you call? Well, no, you shouldn't call because of this idea of chip inflation, because of the fact that the chips that you stand to lose are worth more than the chips that you stand to gain. That means that you really need to be avoiding coin flips in tournaments. It doesn't matter what your stack size is, you should be avoiding coin flips. And this isn't because of survival, okay? It's not because what we're trying to do is survive in this, in a poker tournament. We don't really care about survival. We care about chip accumulation, So it's not because we're trying to squeeze into the money, and part of it has to do with being once you start losing chips, and you might be giving up better equity situations in the future, but really it has to do with this idea that this very strong idea, chip inflation, that when you are risking X amount of your stack to win Y, Y has to be a lot bigger than X for it to make sense in these close call situations. Okay? So chip inflation in a nutshell. Let's talk about changing gears. So what do we mean by changing gears? I asked this question a lot of some people, and it surprised me all the different types of answers I got. What we got? We got Rob K saying yes, agreed with that. 1 is protect the stack, 2 is play the best you can, and 3 is advancing farther. Destronov says very logical and basic, but still something I haven't formulated in my mind. Sometimes the best lessons are the lessons of the most basic concepts. Thank you, guys. So think about for a second. Ask yourself this: what do we mean when we say changing gears? What does it mean, changing gears? Let me tell you what it doesn't mean. Okay. Fine. Evening Dutch. It doesn't mean changing the way we play to exploit a table image that we think we have. Okay? It doesn't mean that if you get exposed, stealing the blinds and you have to show like 5-2 offsuit, now you have to change gears and play tighter because they're all going to be expecting that you're bluffing. That's not what we mean when we say changing gears. Changing gears doesn't mean changing the way you play based on some idea of what you think other people are thinking about you. It doesn't mean changing the way you play to keep your opponents guessing. Okay? Changing gears in poker, when you talk to most professional poker tournament players, they'll give you this answer. That changing gears means changing your pre-flop aggression based on tournament inflection points. Okay? Now, when we're talking about when we're trying to measure pre-flop aggression, something that comes up a lot is VPIP. You'll see this a lot in the heads-up displays. You'll see it a lot on forums when people are talking about, villain has a VPIP of 33%, that kind of thing. Let's define that term just so that we're all on the same page. VPIP stands for the percentage of time that you voluntarily put money into a pot. So anytime you're raising pre-flop or opening, or calling someone else's open raise, when you're not forced to put in a bet, that is being in the big blind or the small blind, then your VPIP percentage is going to go up. So when we talk about changing gears, we're talking about specifically changing our VPIP percentage based on tournament inflection points, right? You can kind of think about it like when you're in a tournament, you're driving in a car, and when you're coming around a turn, you've got to pop it into a kind of a lower gear, right? So let's talk about what the inflection points are. The first and most important one are anti-ratios, right? Let's pull out the structure sheet for the main event of the World Series of Poker last year. And if we start looking at the structure sheet, we start noticing some kind of interesting things. First off, we see a very clear inflection point right here. At level 4, antes are going to kick in. Now imagine you're sitting here with a stack of 30,000, right? And level 3 just ended, and at level 3 you're making it 2.5 times the big blind. So you're making it 750 to risk 450. As soon as that ante kicks in, now the whole the whole tournament changes, and you have to raise your VPIP. Each round is going to be costing you quite a bit more, and each time you can get away with a pre-flop raise without seeing a flop, you're rewarded more. If you look at level 3, if we made it 750 and we win without a flop, we're looking at winning 450. At a full table, we're going to just make it, just so the math is easy, we're going to say that it's a 10-handed table. So there's 250 in antes at the beginning of the first hand of level 4, and then you've got the same 450. So at this point, you're risking 750 to win 700, which is so much better than risking 750, to win 450. And this is assuming that they're raising 2.5 times the big blind. A lot of times you're going to see people raising 3 times the big blind, where they're going to be raising 900 to win 450. You're risking 2 to win 1. As soon as those antes kick in, now you're risking 900 to win 700, which is a lot closer. It's a much better bet. So what does this mean? It means that as soon as those antes kick in, you have to be raising your VPIP way up. You're right. Early on in a tournament, generally to be playing fairly tight and fairly snug. Tight is right. As soon as those antes kick in, you've got to raise, how much your pre-flop VPIP percentage is. And look at what happens at the next round. So we start with an ante at 25 and blinds at 150, 300. So we've got a 1-to-6 ratio of an ante to small blind. The next level, we've got this 50 ante. So the ante doubles, the blinds don't. So we've got a ratio of 1-to-4. So if we're sticking with our 2.5 times the big blind raise, and we're risking 1,000 pre-flop, now we're actually risking 1,000 to win more than 1,000. Now we're risking 1,000 to win 1,100. Our VPIP needs to go even higher at that point. And then at level 6 we have an ante of 50, and blinds at 250, 500. So we've got a 1-to-5 ratio, which is which means that the way that we would be playing this tournament is that we'd play tight on level 1, tight level 2, tight level 3, and level 4 would raise it up and start playing much looser. Much more aggressively pre-flop than we did in level 3, level 2, and level 1. Level 5, we would play even more aggressively than we did in level 4. But in level 6, when the ratio drops back down to 1-to-5, we scale it back a little bit, and we're actually playing tighter in level 6 than we would in level 5. The key here is looking...
You have connection problems and it just stopped, so... And it's choppy for everybody. So is it that Ethernet's not working at all?
No.
Yeah, everybody's chopped. Everybody's saying 555 because they're having really crappy chopping.
Okay, so we got some frames dropped. Go ahead and just try to...
Hardwire is not working at all.
No.
It just doesn't?
Doesn't work. I'll try to figure it out. Okay, so guys, I think that we stopped dropping frames. I'm trying to, I'm still a Twitch version here, so I think that what's going on is that we're having issues with the Wi-Fi. I tried to hardwire it, and that's why we kind of got a late start today. So the next Poker Clinic session that we do, I'm going to try to have that dropped frame rate down to nothing. For now, you're going to just have to kind of refresh, but we shouldn't be dropping frames at this point anymore. Are we doing okay?
Yeah, I have to refresh. Hold on.
Yeah, just give it a refresh and it should be okay.
Let's see.
I'm gonna, just
call the cable company and make it. So I guess you should go back. You should ask people what they heard last and maybe go back.
Yeah, can anyone give me an idea of what you guys were hearing last? I think that we probably dropped off when we're talking about this idea of these ratios, these anti-ratios, and how it affects VPIP, right? We got Kyle Phobes cashes in, Willie Mayan Poker, Princess Laydown. Thanks for joining us here in the chat and the stream. Jack, is it just that we lose you completely? Been streaming with the wireless myself. Yeah, I'm not really sure why we're dropping frames. I don't think that I'm dropping frames anymore.
He said this guy said a router, and he's like maybe.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. I'll figure it out. I might have to get another router. I'm hoping that just using a hard wire for the next stream is going to help it out. Everybody, sorry for the drop frames and sorry for the connection trouble. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and keep on going. We're talking about changing gears, VPIP, and how the ratio of antes to blinds is the first inflection point we have to think about when we're adjusting our VPIP. Okay, so I highlighted a couple of points in this tournament that are just kind of interesting, and also these are very common. This is kind of a common schedule. You're going to often see antes kick in. Most of the time you'll see them kick in actually at the 100-200 level where it'll be like a 1-4 ratio. But you're always going to have these situations where the ratio between your ante and your small blind changes, and based on that change, you have to adjust your VPIP up and down. Just think about it as going into fourth gear, going into fifth gear, going into back to third gear, going to fourth gear. The bigger that ratio is, the more aggressive you have to be. And take a look at how crazy this is. So level 4, you really have to put kick it into aggro mode, compared to level 3. Level 5, you're doing it even more. You're going from a 1-to-6 ratio to a 1-and-4 ratio. So now when you're making it 2.5 times the big blind, you're risking 1,000 to win 1,100, and each orbit is costing you 1,100. So you have to raise your VPIP even more. But then level 6 comes around, and you're looking at a 1-to-5 ratio, and you're kind of hanging back again. You actually play less aggressively going from level 5 to level 6. Level 7 comes, you raise it back up. Then you start to get into these just like balls out modes where you got level 9 where you've got 100 ante and 500 blind, small blind, 1,000 big blind, where this 1-to-5 ratio is you're still going to have a higher VPIP than if the antes weren't in. But then the next level hits, there's no more 25 chips, so there's nowhere more for the ante to go except to double. The blinds don't double; they go up by 20%. So if you look at level 10 and level 11, it just gets drastic. A 1-to-3 ratio where you're risking 3,000 at this point to win 3,800. You're risking 3 to win almost 4. This 1-to-3 ratio is really when you got to put it just head down. You're almost raising anything. Then it pops up to 2, to a 1-and-4 ratio, back to a 1-and-3. This ratio between small blind and ante is really what you need to be paying attention to when you're looking at these anti-inflection points. The second inflection point that you should be aware of is these psychological inflection points. And these are going to be like at the end of the day, especially in tournaments where there's re-entries. People are going to be more likely to gamble it up with short stacks rather than having to come. No one wants to show up on day 2 with less than they started with. You're going to have to keep in mind that that's like a psychological inflection point. You're also going to have payout jumps, and the most obvious is bubble play and final table bubble. So right before you hit the bubble, let's say in a normal tournament, 300 people started, and maybe it pays 40, right? So now you're at about 43, 44 people. This is another time when you have to think about changing gears. It's an inflection point in the tournament where your opponents are going to be changing their VPIP quite a bit. If you're a medium small stack at this point, you also have to change your VPIP quite a bit and just kind of sit back and make the money basically and squeeze. But if you have a nice stack or kind of a medium large stack where you can start kind of abusing the smaller stacks and abusing the medium stacks, you really have to raise that VPIP up. Changing gears. So let's talk about how chip inflation meets changing gears. And the way to think about this is that sometimes they kind of clash together, where you're raising your VPIP, and as long as you're the aggressor, you're this is why aggression is so important, is because you're putting other people in a situation where it doesn't make sense for them to conflict with you because of this idea of chip inflation, right? This is why there's so many hands in poker in poker tournaments where it's a clear open if you're the first to enter the pot, but as soon as someone else is in, you don't want the conflict, and it's a clear fold. So sometimes you get chip inflation, kind of colliding with this idea of changing gears. And the other thing to keep in mind is that if you have a monster stack, right, this idea of chip inflation really kind of kicks in, where if every time you have to raise pre-flop, you're risking a much smaller percentage of your stack than your opponents are risking to kind of look you up, right? Then the amount that you're risking is worth quite a bit less than in terms of real equity value than the amount that they're risking to call you. And this is why when we think about changing gears and inflection points in tournaments, we can also think about changing gears with relation to our chip stack. Basically, the more chips that you have, the higher your VPIP can be, because the amount that you're risking pre-flop is worth less to you than the amount that your opponents would be risking pre-flop to conflict with you. Changing gears meets chip inflation. So let's talk about the takeaway here. So changing gears, the takeaway. In tournaments, you need to constantly be adjusting your own VPIP percentage based on tournament inflection points. And those tournament inflection points are those psychological inflection points, the payout inflection points, and the anti-inflection points. They're also chip stack inflection points. And additionally, you need to react to the VIP percentage changes that your opponents will be making. When you're playing poker, you're not playing with donkeys, right? You're playing with thinking opponents who are trying to do the right thing, make the right moves, and somewhere in there they're going to understand these kind of theoretical concepts like changing gears and chip inflection, even if they can't really say what they are. People know that they're supposed to abuse the bubble, right? People know that when they have a big stack, they're supposed to abuse the smaller stacks. So you have to react to your opponent's VPIP percentages as well. You have to, a big part of changing gears is understanding that your opponents are also changing gears. And you need to react to that, exploit it the best that you can. And that's the takeaway, just thinking, try to think in terms of these tournaments as, you're navigating through a course with it's basically a big bang 'em up derby. There's red, yellow, and green lights coming all the time. When those antes kick in, think about it as a green light. Think about it as a yellow light switching green, and you're ready to start going onto the highway. And when those when the ante ratios start falling to like 1 in 6, 1 in 5. You got the yellow light on, you're popping and kind of slowing down. When it gets back up to like an ante of 200 and blinds of 600, 1200, it's back into fifth gear and back to just zooming as fast as you can, putting your head down and playing as aggressively as possible. That's it. That's what I've got. Thanks for joining us with Poker Clinic. And then we're going to go ahead and open it back up for a little bit of a Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and take that off. Pop this back on. Great. Okay, so Rob says, it's a good presentation. I think it's cool he takes the time to talk to all of us. Thank you, Rob, for joining us. As a Spade 0013, thanks for joining us. Pingy 30, yeah, this is really great. Can't wait for more. Are you going to get partnered soon so we can sub? Yeah, Pingy, I'm trying to get partnered. I got a chance to meet Scott Ball, who is the Twitch poker partner coordinator. So hopefully we'll soon see a little subscribe button down there. If you want to support what I'm doing, there's always that donate button too. I definitely appreciate it. And thank you for joining us on this Saturday night, Pingy. There's a lot of things that we could be doing rather than just working on a game. Not 3 Vinance and Red Dog, nice presentation. Willie O'Man Poker.